welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're jumping straight into an absolutely epic journey back to the Islamic Golden Age. We're going to be looking at one specific mind, a guy who literally rewired how humanity understands the universe. He was the man who taught the world how to crack secret codes with math, standardized medical dosages to save lives, and proved that faith and reason are two halves of the same truth. I know, right? It sounds like pure science fiction. But this was a real, living, breathing person in the 9th century. His name was Al-Kindi. And his breakthroughs? They're so incredibly modern that they actually still pulls through the technology and science you and I use every single day. Let's get right into Section 1, The Aristocrat of Kufa, Rise to the House of Wisdom. So to really understand this guy's genius, we kind of have to start with his roots. Born around 801 CE into the noble Arabian Kinda tribe, Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Kindi was definitely a man of high status. I mean, his dad was actually the governor of Basra. And this aristocratic background, it afforded him an absolutely elite education. He basically absorbed all the knowledge around him and eventually made this massive, pivotal move to Baghdad, the beating heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. At the time, this city was the intellectual capital of the entire world. And Al-Kindi, well, he was destined to become its absolutely brightest star. Once he gets to Baghdad, he joins the legendary House of Wisdom, and surrounded by these incredible historical manuscripts like the ones of Aristotle, Al-Kindi just becomes a towering figure there. He ends up overseeing this massive, super ambitious project to translate Greek philosophical and scientific masterpieces into Arabic. But here's the kicker. He didn't just translate them. He synthesized them. He was actually the very first person to truly reconcile that Hellenistic philosophical thought with Islamic orthodoxy. And that massive achievement earned him his eternal title, the Philosopher of the Arabs. Moving on to Section 2, the Codebreaker, the mathematical heartbeat of language. Now, Al-Kindi's mind wasn't just stuck up in the clouds of high philosophy. No, it was deeply rooted in the gritty and honestly pretty dangerous reality of his time. We're talking about a world of empires, hidden agendas, and secret messages. This environment led him straight into cryptanalysis, which is the science of decrypting hidden messages without knowing the secret key. See, before Al-Kindi came along, breaking codes was basically just a futile guessing game, or you just relied on absolute brute force. The rule was, if you didn't have the key, the message was perfectly safe. Well, Al-Kindi completely shattered that assumption. What we're looking at here is an actual page from his groundbreaking 850 AD book on decrypting encrypted correspondence. It's literally the oldest known description of cryptanalysis in existence. And in it, Al-Kindi realizes something just profoundly beautiful. He realized that language, any language, isn't just some random assortment of words. It actually possesses a strict, underlying mathematical rhythm. So he develops this totally game-changing method called frequency analysis. And the elegant logic of it works exactly like this. First, you take your secret ciphertext, and you place it right next to a normal, plain text written in the same language. Second, you just count. You count how frequently each letter appears in both texts. Like in English, for example, the letter E shows up the most often, right? Third, you simply match the most frequent symbols in the secret code to the most frequent letters in the natural language. It's brilliant. With just a few attempts, the entire encrypted message just unravels right before your eyes. So the really crucial point here is that this wasn't just a win for 9th century spies. By noticing that the relative frequency of a letter stabilizes at a predictable value, Al-Kindi basically performed the very first practical application of statistical methods in history. So yes, he's the father of cryptanalysis for sure, but he is also, arguably, the father of modern statistics. And he beat European giants like Pascal and Fermat to the punch by a staggering 800 years. Unbelievable. Which brings us to Section 3, the mathematician of medicine, healing with harmony. Now, Al-Kindi figured if he could find mathematics hidden inside language, he could probably find it in the human body too. And this brilliantly illustrates his mindset. For centuries, figuring out the right dosage of a medicine was just a dangerously wild guessing game. I mean, too little and the patient stays sick. Too much and boom, the medicine becomes a poison. Al-Kindi completely changed this by inventing posology, a mathematical scale to quantify the exact strength of drugs. He applied hardcore math to pharmacology so he could calculate exact drug strengths. He even incorporated a whole system to predict the most critical days of a patient's illness based on the phases of the moon. The result? Precise, standardized medicine. Doctors finally had an easy-to-use table. They didn't have to guess anymore. He quite literally took the guesswork out of medicine to save lives. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that his approach to healing wasn't just chemical, it was also musical. Al-Kindi was a total pioneer of music therapy. He deeply believed that the harmony of musical instruments, like the oud, a type of lute, actually reflected the harmony of the universe itself. By playing very specific melodies, he thought he could physically influence the proportion of liquids in the human body, alter a person's temperament, and literally turn the soul toward moral perfection. In fact, the historical sources even note that he successfully used this therapy to treat a quadriplegic boy. Let's move to Section 4. The Architect of Light, Challenging the Ancients. See how this builds? Because he didn't just map language and the body. He went ahead and mapped light itself. As an optical theorist, he was absolutely not afraid to challenge the ancient Greeks, which ended up fundamentally shifting how we understand vision today. It all starts with this one super fundamental question. How do we actually see the light and shapes of the world? I mean, Aristotle thought we saw things because the medium of the air was affected. Euclid thought vision occurred in these perfectly straight lines, almost like abstract geometrical concepts. But Al-Kindi, in his famous Latin-translated book, De Aspectibus, he dug for a much deeper truth. What he developed is what we now call the punctiform analysis of light. He basically argued that every single point on a luminous surface emits its own rays, and these rays travel out in every possible direction, instantly, along straight paths. He took abstract geometry and actually applied it to physical, three-dimensional light rays. This incredibly exact geometric mapping laid the absolute critical groundwork for future optical giants like Ibn al-Haytham. Once again, Al-Kindi proved that light, just like language and medicine, acts mathematically. Which, unfortunately, brings us to Section 5, the disgraced sage, the lonely end of a polymath. As is pretty often the case with history's greatest minds, his story does end in some rather dark shadows. While he totally thrived under previous rulers, he was even tutoring the caliph's own son. The political tides shifted violently in Baghdad under Caliph al-Mutawakkil. Al-Kindi completely fell into disgrace. His massive, absolutely legendary library? Confiscated. He was physically beaten, and his immense influence quickly waned as this strong, orthodox pushback grew against his kind of philosophical inquiry. Yet, despite all the brutal persecution he faced at the end of his life, look at this number. He authored a staggering 260-plus books. Over 260! He wrote extensively on philosophy, geometry, medicine, cryptography, logic, and physics. The sheer volume is just mind-blowing. He even wrote extensively on meteorology. Actually, modern studies still analyze his scientific weather forecasting. He managed to combine native Arabic agricultural traditions, Aristotelian meteorology, and scientific astronomy just to predict the weather. His text ended up deeply influencing the whole of the Middle Ages. His intellect was, quite simply, boundless. So Al-Kindi died a relatively lonely man in Baghdad around 873 CE. But his legacy, it is entirely immortal. He was the great bridge of his era. He took the profound wisdom of the ancient Greeks, masterfully synthesized it with Islamic theology, and pushed the absolute boundaries of mathematics into entirely new sciences. He truly, deeply earned his eternal title, the Philosopher of the Arabs. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If one man, equipped with literally nothing but his mind and a quill back in the 9th century, could map the hidden geometry of light, crack the mathematical code of human language, and calculate the harmony of life itself, well, what invisible mathematical heartbeats are we failing to notice in our own world today? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you in the next one.